Ripley's Believe It or Not. The Trump administration has now filed a lawsuit against the state of California, claiming that California's animal welfare regulations are actually pushing up the price of eggs across the United States. But what really is driving up the price of eggs in the United States? We'll try and get you an answer for that. And also in the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen survives a no-confidence vote in the European Parliament, marking the very first such challenge to her leadership since taking office. But let's of course start with what is happening in the United States of America, where Washington and California have locked horns in what is now turned into a legal tussle. And the reason for this are the soaring egg prices. The Trump administration has now filed a lawsuit against the state of California, stating that California's animal welfare regulations are driving up egg prices for all Americans. Now, the lawsuit targets 3 key laws which mandate minimum space and living standards for egg-laying hens. Now, California requires all eggs sold in the state, even from other state producers, to comply with these standards. Now, the administration argues that this violates the 1970 Federal Egg Products Inspection Act, which calls for national uniformity in egg safety. The suit names Governor Gavin Newsom and other top state officials as the defendants. Now, according to the latest Consumer Price Index, the average cost of eggs is up by nearly 40% compared to this time last year. But experts are pointing to multiple factors, most notably the bird flu pandemic that has severely disrupted the supply chains of over 30 million egg-laying birds have been culled in 2025 alone to control outbreaks. Now, wholesale prices for grade A large eggs have surged by nearly 255% earlier this year, while retail prices have remained high due to slower adjustments at grocery shops. Now, despite a recent drop in wholesale values, supply remains pretty tight, and Easter demand could drive prices further up. Now, market analysts say that California's regulations may have caused a price bump years ago, but today's elevated prices are largely driven by supply constraints and strong demand. The USDA reports frozen egg inventories are down nearly 55% from last year, and yolk stocks are at record lows. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice is probing potential antitrust violations, though most analysts see no foul play. The rise in prices has even led to a 5-fold increase in plant-based egg substitute sales in 2025. So as the legal battle unfolds, the debate over animal welfare, federal oversight and food inflation continues to intensify in the United States of America. All right, now to give us more updates on this, we're joined in this broadcast by our correspondent Susan Therani, who's joining us live from New York. Susan, this is a case that's going to make global headlines. The price of eggs has gone up, and the Trump administration has taken the state of California to court over it. What is the price of eggs in the United States at the moment, and why is Trump administration blaming the state of California?
You know, about the price of eggs, at least here in New York, it's just fascinating to see how it ranges from about $3 a dozen to all the way to $7 or $8. I do remember that during the election season, this was really a hot topic, and egg prices were actually in 2024 a lot higher. But nonetheless, this egg has just become this staple topic about how the economy is doing in the back of people's minds and public perception. And that may be one of the reasons why President Trump is going after California. Now, the administration is trying to, as you mentioned, roll back California's welfare laws. California says that this was put on the ballot and the people voted for it in California. And also it was recently upheld by the Supreme Court as recent as 2023. Nonetheless, now a federal judge is going to decide whether or not states can override federal laws. And if the judge goes ahead and rules in favor of the Department of Justice and the government, it'll really set a precedent on whether or not the federal government can ultimately, interfere in the state's animal welfare and ethics issues. And it'll set a precedent and possibly open the road for more lawsuits like this or the lack of.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Susan Therani, for joining us with all those updates there. Now, the American President Donald Trump has turned the tables on the former FBI and the CIA chief who were once probing Donald Trump, allegedly taking Russia's help to win the election of 2016. Now, the case that cast a huge shadow on Trump's first term in office, and now the American president has defended the investigation on the former intel chiefs. The U.S. Justice Department has opened a criminal investigation against the former FBI Director James Comey and the former CIA Director John Brennan. Now, speaking to reporters at a lunch meeting with African leaders at the White House, Trump called the two men to be dishonest and bad people. Listen.
I know nothing about it other than what I read today, but I will tell you, I think they're very dishonest people. I think they're crooked as hell, and maybe they have to pay a price for that. I believe they are truly bad people and dishonest people, so whatever happens, happens.
Now, the full scope of the criminal investigations into Brennan and Comey is unclear. FBI's new probe will focus on whether the former intel chiefs actively conspired against Trump. The agency will investigate whether Comey and Brennan made some false statements to the Congress during the highly charged 2016 investigation into Russian interference. Now, in 2019, Special Counsel Robert Mueller concluded that Russia did interfere in the election to help Trump, but fell short of claiming that Trump's campaign had coordinated with Moscow. Now, Kash Patel, who Trump has chosen to head the FBI, is now looking into the matter. But Kash Patel has made his views on the Russia probe pretty clear. In a book that was published in 2023, Kash Patel has named Comey and Brennan as part of what he calls the executive branch of the deep state. Now, just last month, a declassified CIA memo had challenged the work intelligence agencies had done to conclude that Russia had interfered in the 2016 presidential elections. The memo was written on the orders of the CIA Director John Ratcliffe. The latest investigation is an effort by Trump to shrug off the dark spot that has tainted his first term in office. The European Commission's President, Ursula von der Leyen, has managed to survive a no-confidence vote that was brought in the European Parliament, marking the very first such challenge to her leadership since taking office. The motion was primarily tabled by the far-right lawmakers who accused Ursula von der Leyen and a team of undermining trust in the European Union through alleged unlawful actions. The most notable criticism over the Commission's refusal to disclose private communications with Pfizer during the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. Now, despite the heated accusations, the motion failed to secure the necessary two-thirds majority, with 175 MEPs voting in favour, 360 against, and 18 abstentions. Now, the vote has also revealed some deep fractures within the European Parliament. The European Conservatives and Reformers group are especially divided, with some members supporting the motion and others opposing it. Meanwhile, other political families, from socialists to the liberals, have voiced their own concerns over issues such as transparency, the Commission's handling of the Green Deal, and accusations of power centralization. Now, Ursula von der Leyen did manage to secure a crucial support from the socialists and liberals by promising to preserve the European Social Fund aimed at helping vulnerable populations in the upcoming EU's long-term budget. Now, this also marks, interestingly, the first no-confidence vote against the Commission's president since 2014, when the then-President Jean-Claude Juncker had survived a similar challenge. While Ursula von der Leyen remains in office, the vote has clearly shaken her political coalition, has also exposed some growing tensions within the EU's governing bodies. All right, now to give us more details on this, we're joined by our correspondent Will Densor, who's joining us from Brussels. Will, this is an interesting case that, of course, was a no-confidence vote that was brought against Ursula von der Leyen. Now, give us a sense why these far-right MEPs were not happy with Ursula von der Leyen and what happens from here on.
Well, as you rightly mentioned, this motion that was presented by a far-right MEP from Romania was tabled due to those grievances that have become known as Pfizergate over recent years. This is a scandal alleging that Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, effectively didn't provide enough transparency when it came to communications with the Pfizer chief during the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially the EU's efforts to procure COVID-19 vaccines. There have been legal battles when it comes to making those WhatsApp conversations public. Von der Leyen has very much downplayed wrongdoing, denied wrongdoing, was very much on the offensive in a debate on this topic of her confidence vote on Monday in the European Parliament, where she said that it is normal for a Commission President in her position during the extraordinary times that we were all living in during the COVID-19 pandemic to have these kinds of conversations with pharmaceutical executives. As you mentioned as well, there are also grievances when it comes to a perceived lack of transparency from the Commission and increasing centrality, autonomy, especially when it comes to things like the EU's efforts to ramp up its defence spending. So plenty of agitation from the right, who saw an incredibly successful European elections last year. They are growing increasingly their voices becoming increasingly loud in the European Parliament without having enough of a threshold to break the consensus centrists. However, again, as you rightly mentioned, there have been fractures in the centre and on the left of the political spectrum.
Right.
And that was again evident during this parliamentary debate on Monday, although again we saw that the centrists did ultimately side with von der Leyen, which is why she convincingly won this vote in Parliament.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Will Densor, for getting us all those updates there. All right, let's now shift our attention to what is happening in the United Kingdom. There is a major shift that appears to be underway in British politics. The former Conservative Party chair, Sir Jake Bry, has now joined the Reform UK, becoming the most high-profile Tory to cross over into Nigel Farage's party. Now, this move deals a fresh blow to the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch, who is now facing a growing exodus of disgruntled Conservatives in the wake of the party's crushing defeat in the July general elections. In a fiery article published in The Sun, Berry has accused both the Conservatives and the Labour of wrecking the country over the past 2 decades. Now, the former Member of Parliament from Rosendale and Darwin, who lost his seat to Labour last month, said that he will now campaign to make a Reform UK the next leading government party. He said that the Conservative governments that he had been a part of share the blame, and 20 years of Labour and Tory rule has wrecked Britain. The defection marks a serious strategic loss for the Conservatives. He's in fact become the 5th former Conservative Member of Parliament to switch sides and join Reform UK in recent years, and also the 2nd ex-cabinet minister after the former Welsh Secretary David Jones. Now, Nigel Farage has long positioned Reform UK as an insurgent force that is opposed to what he claims is the failure of the Conservative migration and economic policies. Now, recent polls are showing that he will be breaking the Labour-Tory duopoly in British politics, and polls show that if elections are to be held today, then Nigel Farage will end up unseating Keir Starmer as the British Prime Minister. But more than Labour, he's also become a threat to the Tories, as he's poised to replace the Conservative Party on the National Front with his right-wing agenda. The presidents of the United States and Brazil are engaged in a war of words. Brazil has threatened to reciprocate after Donald Trump announced a 50% tariff on goods from the South American nation. The new tariff came amidst an escalating row over the American president's support for the coup-accused ex-leader Jair Bolsonaro. Now, Trump has in fact announced that he will slap a 50% tariff on Brazilian imports starting from the 1st of August, citing Brazil's insidious attacks on free elections and warning of escalation if the country were to retaliate. Now, President Lula da Silva quickly shot back on X. Any unilateral tariff increase will be addressed in the wake of the Brazilian law of economic reciprocity. He added that Brazil is in fact a sovereign nation with independent institutions and will not accept any form of tutelage. Earlier, Brasilia had summoned Washington's top envoy to the country to explain an embassy statement describing Bolsonaro as victim of political persecution, echoing Trump's claims of a witch hunt against the 70-year-old Brazilian firebrand. Trump then announced the new tariff via a letter addressed to Lula. Trump criticized the treatment of Bolsonaro as an international disgrace and said that the trial should not be taking place. He further added that Washington would launch an investigation into Brazil's trade practices. Now, Brazil is in fact the second largest exporter of steel to the United States after Canada, shipping 4 million tons of the metal in 2024. It all started with the American president posting on defense of his right-wing Brazilian ally, calling out the Brazilian authorities to leave Bolsonaro alone. Now, Trump also accused the lawmakers of launching an alleged witch hunt against the 70-year-old leader. Now, Trump's comments soon spiraled into a full-blown political slugfest, drawing some sharp rebuke from the Brazilian president himself, who set diplomatic niceties aside and hit back at Trump's interference, adding that no one is above the law. Now, Bolsonaro is in the midst of a trial for hatching a coup plot to oust his liberal opponent and current Brazilian president Lula da Silva after losing in the elections in 2022. The Brazilian president had also slammed the American leader over his threat to impose tariffs on countries that align themselves with BRICS.
A president of a country the size of the United States to go around threatening the world on the internet, it's not right. He needs to understand that the world has changed. You know? No, we don't want an emperor. We are sovereign nations. If he thinks he can impose tariffs on countries, countries also have the right to do the same.
Now, President Trump has stated on social media that he'll impose an additional 10% tariff on any country that aligns itself with what he calls anti-American BRICS policies. Now, Trump's statement, in fact, came hours after the BRICS grouping of nations, including Russia, India and China, criticized U.S. sanctions. Now, Brazil hosted the 17th BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro. The former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol returned to prison after a court approved a warrant sought by prosecutors investigating his attempt to impose martial law last year. The latest arrest warrant was issued over concerns that Yoon would in fact destroy evidence in the case. Now, Yoon is being held in the Seoul Detention Center about 20 kilometers south of the capital. His solitary cell has only got a fan and no air conditioning, as a heat wave has gripped South Korea. And according to official schedule, he was offered a regulation breakfast including steamed potatoes and milk. The investigators have said that Yoon's status as former president will be duly considered, but otherwise he'll be treated like any other suspect. Now, Yoon spent nearly about 52 days in prison early in the year but was released 4 months ago on technical grounds. The conservative politician faces criminal charges of insurrection. That could carry a sentence of life in prison or death. And Yoon's criminal trial has continued with a hearing on Thursday. Although he did not attend for the very first time, the Constitutional Court ousted him as president in April, upholding Parliament's impeachment for the martial law bid, which shocked South Koreans and triggered months of political turmoil. Now, Yoon in fact plunged the country into a political crisis when he sought to subvert civilian rule on the 3rd of December last year, sending armed soldiers to Parliament in a bid to prevent lawmakers voting down his declaration of martial law. He in fact became the first sitting South Korean president to be taken into custody when he was detained in January after spending weeks resisting arrest. He was released on procedural grounds in March, even as his trial on insurrection charges has continued. Now, Kenya has been engulfed in deadly anti-government protests, and now the country's President William Ruto has broken his silence, declaring that he will not allow what he calls anarchy to take hold under the guise of peaceful demonstrations.
Someone who goes out and burns other people's businesses, goes and sets other people's property on fire. Someone like that should be shot in the leg, taken to hospital and taken to court. Yes, They, police, should not kill such a person, but shoot those legs and break them, let them go to hospital, and then be arraigned in court.
Now, the president has accused political rivals of instigating the unrest in a bid to overthrow his government through unconstitutional means. Now, the comments have come after a fresh wave of protests swept through Nairobi and 17 other countries, leaving at least about 50 people dead and over 100 others injured in the last 2 weeks. The demonstrations, initially sparked by outrage over police brutality and also the death of a popular blogger in custody, have now grown into a national movement against government and police violence. The United Nations Human Rights Chief has urged the Kenyan authorities to address the root cause of the public grievances. 5 police officers have been charged in connection to the blogger's death and also the close-range shooting that has further fueled the outrage. With over 500 people arrested and public anger still simmering, questions now loom over how far Ruto's government will go to contain the dissent, and for how long will violent clashes continue to rise on the streets of Kenya. Now, Malaysia's most enduring political figure, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, has now become one of the world's oldest living former national leaders. This, as he's now touched the age of 100. The messages, of course, poured in from across Malaysia and indeed the rest of the world, where Mahathir is hailed as a moderate voice who dared to criticize the Western power structures. Now, Mahathir's political influence may have diminished after his 2022 electoral defeat, but his voice still remains loud in national debate. So let's take a look at some of the biggest turning points in Mahathir's long and enduring political career. In 1981, he became the Prime Minister, launching an era of rapid industrialization and growth and strongman style of leadership. One of the biggest flashpoints came in 1998 when he sacked his deputy Anwar Ibrahim, triggering the reform movement and decades of political rivalry. After retiring in 2003 as the country's longest-serving leader, he staged a stunning comeback in 2018, returning to power at the age of 92 and toppling Najib Razak's scandal-plagued government. But his second stint was short-lived and was ended by a coalition infighting in 2020. 2 years later, in 2022, he lost his parliamentary seat, the first electoral defeat for him in over 5 decades. Now, despite their political differences, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim offered a warm message wishing Mahathir well-being, peace of mind and strength at the age of 100. He might be away from power, corridors of power, but he still casts a big influence over Malaysian society.
So long as I can function, I want to function. Yeah. I want to behave almost as if I'm not getting old. Yeah. I try to live the same life that I lived when I was younger. I work, I come to office, I attend functions and all that. And I think being active is what keeps me alive. Make use of your body and mind, then it will function. You fail to make use of your body and mind, it deteriorates. It becomes weaker and weaker, and soon your age makes you unable to function.
100 years young and still going strong. And with that, it's also a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
As Hollywood reels from a crisis, we take a look at what's troubling the film crew. Know all about the actors in the running to play James Bond.
Hi everybody, namaskar.
And meet Indian singer Usha Uthup as she talks about her musical journey. All this and much more with me, Diksha Bisla, on WION at these times. This week on West Asia Post, Israel wants to turn Gaza into a human cage. A city in ruins fenced in from all sides. A military mishap or a mastermind move? How Iran tricked Israeli missiles into hitting its own targets. And inside Iran's mass deportation drive, 500,000 Afghans forced out. Tehran calls them a security threat and accusations of espionage for Israel.
Watch the West Asia Post with me, Radi Francis, every Friday at these times, only on WION, World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Hello and welcome. You're watching WION World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look at what is making headlines at this hour. The Russian and American top diplomats hold a frank exchange over the Ukraine war, with the American Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov had shared a new idea for the conflict. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the French President Emmanuel Macron called for more pressure in the form of fresh sanctions against Moscow to secure a ceasefire in Ukraine. Now, Hamas has said that it opposes any ceasefire deal that includes a large Israeli military presence in the Palestinian-occupied territory of Gaza, after offering to release some hostages. As the civil defense has reported, scores of Palestinians have again been killed in the Palestinian territory. The Texas authorities face mounting scrutiny over the response to the catastrophic flooding that has left more than 120 people dead, as details surface about the reported delays of early alerts that could have saved lives.